Man, doing this podcast and doing the coaching work I do, I get to meet so many interesting people. And today's guest is definitely no exception. So his name is Zachary Rackovan, and he has such a cool story. He's a 35-year-old father of two. He's a former detective for a city just south of St. Louis, and he's a now working photographer who is chasing his dreams and living a life in an intentional manner. He's been married for 13 years to his partner in crime, Ashley. So what does that actually mean? So Zach used to be a cop. He was a detective, as he said, and also worked in the sex crimes unit, like the child sex crimes unit. So you can imagine what he's seen. And he really did something that so many of us fantasize about and are never able to find up the courage or, find the path in order to do that. But he walked away from a career in policing, and he's now traveling the country with his family in a motorhome, working as a professional racing photographer. And his photography is absolutely fucking incredible. But I've gotten to know Zach through some groups we're a member of, through some coaching we're doing, and just through masterminds that I'm hosting. And this guy is amazing, and he is such a natural-born storyteller. So in this particular episode, he talks about his time during his policing career and the impact that had on him, not just from an emotional and mental health point of view, but from the identity point of view and being wrapped up in it and not being able to turn that off. And then ultimately walking away from it. Actually, we talk about fear. We talk about being in, intense traumatic situations. We talk about the impact that had on him, but not just the impact it had on Zach, the impact that he saw on his coworkers and his brothers in blue, as it were. But then we talk about what it's been like for him to walk away from it and what it was like for him to separate himself from that tribe, right? Because he doesn't talk to too many people anymore, and he's living a very different life now. So I really encourage you to listen to this episode with Zach, because it's a powerful story, or stories, I guess you could say, on policing, on, finding your path and then deciding that path isn't for you. He's got powerful stories about emotional and mental well-being and mental health, and then really dramatically altering the trajectory of his life and doing something that will bring him and his family closer together and help him and his family live the life of their dreams. And I give the guy a ton of credit, and now he's working on transitioning again. And it's a really, really inspiring and powerful story. So Zach, brother, thank you for being on the podcast. Thanks for being the guy that you are. And thanks for being a friend. I really enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait to see where you go, man, because you're a natural. You are a man committed to service, and you are a fucking great storyteller, brother. I'm constantly racking my brain thinking, okay, how do I add more value to people above and beyond the already awesome conversations that we're having in the Mental Health Warriors podcast? And that's why I've launched a Patreon page. Patreon is patreon.com and /mental health warriors. Patreon.com/mental health warriors. So what is Patreon? Patreon is this amazing platform where people can make a direct contribution to those that are creating content that they love. And I know you love the Mental Health Warriors podcast because you're listening to it and you're spreading the word, but I also know that you support the Mental Health Warriors mission, which is to assemble the most diverse and complete set of perspectives on emotional and mental healing and well-being anywhere on the internet, period. And I will not stop until we accomplish that goal together. But starting and running a movement, or building a movement and running a podcast, is not free, and it's not cheap. There are all kinds of costs: graphic design costs, there's web hosting costs and web development costs and podcast editing costs and podcast hosting costs and calendaring, like scheduling costs, and it all adds up. Right? And I need the Mental Health Warriors movement to not only be self-sustaining, but I need to grow it, because the amount of people that we can help is just almost limitless. And I've seen how many lives we've touched already. Okay, but I'm not asking you to make a donation. I am telling you that I am offering you a value exchange. And what that means is, in support or in return for your financial contribution to the Mental Health Warriors podcast and movement, I will offer you rewards that are super, super valuable and super impactful in your life. Okay. Like, you will be shocked at what I offer you in exchange for your financial contribution. So please head on over to patreon.com/mentalhealthwarriors, support the show, and let me make a contribution back to you in return for your contribution to supporting the movement. It's such a beautiful, virtuous cycle, and I would love for you to be part of it. And I can't thank you enough for your continued support of what we're trying to do here, because every single person listening to this show has someone in their life that can benefit from what we are doing at Mental Health Warriors, and I want to be able to reach them. And if you want to also support the show, please head on over to iTunes and leave us a review and a rating, because that helps us get surface higher in the search results. It helps more people reach our podcast. It literally takes you 2 minutes to do that, and it will help us spread our message. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening, and thank you for helping me make a difference in people's lives. If you're a high performer who craves deeper human connection, and you want to develop powerful relationships to help you achieve personal and professional excellence, and you're sick and tired of feeling isolated and alone, then my new coaching program, Serving Powerfully, is for you. I will show you how to become more open and more powerful so you can create those human connections that allow you to see, execute on, and realize an entirely different caliber of opportunities. You will walk out of our time together with a vastly increased ability to serve other people more powerfully. It's amazing how far you can go when someone believes in you. So if this sounds like you, please, let's set up a time to have a powerful conversation. Email me at jason@servingpowerfully.com, and let's get started.
Warriors are not born. Warriors are forged in the crucible of adversity. Warriors without fear are warriors without courage. We are men, destroying stigma and stereotypes. We are a band of brothers, because in brotherhood there is strength. Our weapons are strength, empathy, and honesty. We are Mental Health Warriors, and this is our voice.
Hey, Zach, welcome to the Mental Health Warriors podcast, my friend.
Sounds good. I'm glad to be here, man.
This is going to be sort of a unique conversation because I have no idea actually what the hell we're going to talk about. But we had a conversation, had a few conversations over the past few weeks, and they've been great. So I figured why not continue it? And I know that you have a lot of value to add to the audience. So here we go. Why don't you tell us, you used to be a cop, and one of the things I found really interesting about our conversation was the fact that you are no longer a cop. So why don't you tell us what you're doing now and why you made the decision to transition away from policing?
Well, I spent 10 years on the force. I ended my career as a detective. I investigated child sex crimes and homicide before I left, and I knew I needed a change. And during the time that I'd been a cop, I'd also pursued a dream that I had separately from that, which was to be a professional photographer. It kind of started out, policing got me into photography. I was a crime scene photographer, so naturally I had some inclination to do the photography work, but I also on the side race motorcycles. So as crazy as that sounds, that's how this all came together, was police work, racing motorcycles, and taking pictures of crime scenes. But had a wreck at Gateway in 2005 or 6, can't remember, it's been so long ago, and decided that it was probably not the smartest thing for me to be doing with a job that required me to be physically fit and ready for duty. So I took the option of going and pursuing the dream and working with my friends and being able to still be present with them, but at the same time not being. Hold on, Jason. I'm sorry, my computer just went into sleep mode. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Hopefully you can edit this stuff, right?
Yeah, we don't edit it, man. It's okay.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I'm waiting for it to come back up. I have no video. But back to what I was saying. anyway, it got me into taking pictures with my friends. It allowed me to stay at the track and still be active with them. And it grew from there. It became did a couple shots here and there, did a couple of events here and there, and now it's what we do every weekend from April through October. And I transitioned into being full-time. As of April 21st of 2016, I retired from the police department, and I've become a full-time motorsports photographer.
Wow, that's incredible. What kind of bikes did you race?
I started out on a Honda Superhawk, which is not necessarily a race bike, but it was more just a run around the infield kind of bike. And then I moved to a GSXR 1000, but the 1000 was a lot, and I never really fully engaged in it. It was one of those things that after my wreck, I struggled with getting back on the bike and still maintain. And I didn't get hurt. That was a crazy thing. But I had a pretty good psychological experience out of it. Not necessarily knowing that I didn't get hurt, but I knew that I really could have easily. And working the road, working police work, working traffic, I knew how quickly you can go from a good day out with your buddies, riding your motorcycle, to a day of filled with ambulances and helicopters and seeing stuff like that. So I knew that I was always on the razor's edge of getting hurt, and that gave me the inclination that this is probably not the best move. It was actually my wife. She said, I'll never stop you from doing something you want to do or chasing a dream. And, but we had to be realistic. Racing motorcycles was a hobby. It definitely was not a career path for me. I wasn't going to ever be Valentino Rossi or any of these popular guys that race motorcycles. So it was one of those things where I had to decide if I wanted to risk my family's, well-being and financial well-being to chase the dreams of being a club motorcycle racer. So I made the change to spectator from participant.
Was that a tough transition, or were you ready?
I was ready. I think that I knew the risk. Like I said, I knew the risk was there, and I quickly realized, and I had a hobby of collecting hobbies, meaning that I just liked engaging in stuff. I liked engaging in learning stuff. I liked engaging with people, and I quickly realized that I could still fulfill that, and I could still get the thirst of dealing with the people and having friends, and I didn't have to race motorcycles to do it. So that's when I wanted to maintain that interaction. So picking up the camera, I still get the adrenaline. I'm still on the track. I'm still out there with the guys that I know and people that I become friends with, but I lessened a lot of the risk. I mean, I could always get hit by a bike, but that's super rare. But it was a way to stay connected and stay engaged, but to definitely eliminate some of the risks that I was facing.
I remember when I think I was 18 years old, and man, all I wanted was a sport bike. And I had this I think I paid 25. I mean, this would have been, 1990, I suppose. And I bought this like $3,000 stereo. And it was this massive piece of kit. And my buddy had a 1988 Ninja 600. And I mean, which is nothing compared to the bikes now. I think it had 75 horsepower, if I remember right. But anyway, so I traded him for this, my stereo for his bicycle, or for my stereo for his motorbike. And I had no license. I had no concept of how to drive a motorcycle, but I just knew that this would make me a badass. So I get the motorcycle. My parents are like, what are you even doing? Like, you're not even allowed to drive that thing. You don't have a license. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I got on the bike, and literally, I think I was on it for about 15 seconds, and I popped the clutch and drove it to their fence. I then took it out on the road and was driving down, showing off for my little brother, and it never even occurred to me that if I locked up the front tire, the bike would fall over. I don't know. I didn't even think about it. So, I mean, this was all day one, so it's just my risk to reward processing or assessment part of my brain was way out of whack. So, but one thing I wanted to ask you about was when you had that crash, do you remember what it was like in that exact moment?
100%. Like I remember when I was flipping through the air, because I wrecked. It wasn't crazy. I wasn't going down a straightaway doing 200 miles an hour. I was in a turn, and it was a lack of skill. As some people would say, I ran out of talent, but I still had plenty of corner left to go. So I leaned into the corner, and I felt the bike escape from underneath me. It pushed out underneath me, and I started doing the flips in the air. And I remember thinking to myself, if I could just stand up, this would all stop. Yeah. So I remember while tumbling at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, whatever it was, trying to stand up and then I'd fall back down, and then I'd try to stand up and I'd fall back down. It actually was a great metaphor for life, because when you're going through something, you just think if you can just stop it, it would get better. And I remember laying down on my back and putting my hand up, and there was dust on me, and I could see the dust fall straight. Then I knew that I had stopped moving. And that was something later to find out that a lot of motorcycle guys would tell you, when you wreck, reach down and grab grass if you're in the grass and let it sprinkle. And if it falls, that means you stop moving. It's okay to get up. And I experienced that because I thought I was stopped. Because, I've never tumbled across the asphalt at 80 miles an hour, so I didn't know what to expect from it. And I just thought, I'll just get up. Well, inertia had another plan for that. So I hit the airbag, because at most racetracks they line the impact corners with something called air fence, which is a huge. That's a passion project for me. I do a lot of fundraising with one of our local motorcycle clubs to put more air fence on racetracks. But you hit the bag, you stop, and I got up, and I remember vividly giving my buddy, who is the guy that runs the organization that I still shoot for, the thumbs up, letting him know that I was all right. Then I picked my bike up and we went on about our way. But that was the last time. At that time was the last time I touched the racetrack with a motorcycle. He finally convinced me to do it last year, and I was terrified. I got out there and I don't own a race bike anymore. I have the little 250 or a 200 dirt bike that I get around for shooting photos. And he said, "Come on, man, you got to get back out there. You got to give it a try. You got to re-engage with it. You got to face your fears." And I said, "It's not about facing my fears. I know what I was doing was stupid. That's not necessarily facing the fear. That's just being realistic." But he got me back out there on a ZX-10R, and you talk about the transformation between bikes of the past and bikes now. This bike hit close to 200 horsepower, and like I said, I hadn't ridden a sport bike in 10 years. So I made 2 laps. I also had a pulled muscle on my neck, so I couldn't turn my head, which was interesting to say the least. So the photos my wife took of me, I could tell that I was uncomfortable, and it reaffirmed that I had made the right decision to move from the bike to the camera and then eventually to racing cars. But that's a whole nother topic. So yeah, I remember exactly what happened.
That's interesting. So back to your policing career. So you said you were on for 10 years. What city did you police in?
Just south of St. Louis. It's a city called Arnold. It's about 30,000 people. It definitely wasn't a high crime rate area. It was a suburb of St. Louis. We had our fair share of stuff that would come through, but for the most part, it was fairly docile. And until I started moving to the detective bureau, then things ramped up because you had a lot more exposure because there wasn't a whole lot of us. So every crime that came through was us. But yeah, just south of St. Louis, about 15 minutes on Highway 55.
So when you become a detective, so maybe you can tell like how long you were on the job before you became a detective, but what is the appeal about taking on that role when you're a cop?
It's hard to describe. I mean, I was a patrolman for 7 years, and but in that time I got to do all kinds of neat stuff. I was a crisis intervention team officer. I was the photographer for our crew, so I did all the police and evidence stuff. And when you get the opportunity to go to the detective bureau, for me, I always thirsted for more knowledge. I wanted more training. Any training, educational opportunity that they would let me go to or attend, I would take it. A lot of the guys would complain like, "Man, I don't want to go to training tonight. Or today. I'm gonna sit in the classroom all day. I just want to go out and drive around." But for me, anything I could get, I would take it because once I got it, they couldn't take it away from me. So I knew that going to detective bureau was the next step in that evolution of training. It would open me up to working homicides, and and it's a weird thing when you're a cop. You look for crime, like you look to have a homicide, you look to have this, and you don't want it to happen, but you're not necessarily unexcited when it does, because now it's just like a firefighter. They don't want to have somebody's house burned down, but they're built and designed to fight fires. So when they get an opportunity to work, there's some level of excitement or adrenaline that comes in because now they get to go do what they're trained to do. But at the same time, somebody has to suffer for them to get that opportunity, and it's a weird dichotomy with it. And the same thing in law enforcement. So when you make the detective bureau, you sit around hoping you never get the phone call, but you quietly are saying, "Come on, man, something happened, so I have something to do, something to investigate, something to use all this training for, or hone my skills, or whatever you want to call it." And so it was a weird thing, but becoming a detective was a great thing and a horrible thing all at the same time.
And then how did you end up moving into the child sex crimes unit? Because I've talked to some cops that have done that job, and they are fucking wrecked as a result of it. So what made you, I guess probably, I'm assuming that, trying to help these kids is what motivated you to do it. But I guess how did that come about, and what kind of toll did that take on you?
Well, it's definitely not something that I, signed up for on the bulletin board, hoping for an opportunity to do it. Like I mentioned earlier, we weren't a big department. We had 6 men in our detective bureau. So as a result of that, that size, we investigated everything. We didn't have it wasn't like the NYPD or LAPD where, you could go into robbery, homicide, you could go into crimes against person. It was the detective bureau. So when something bad happened, everybody went. So therefore, we all got cross-trained because you didn't know it. If I was on vacation and a kid was in crisis and needed help, somebody had to help him. So they would cross-train my partner on child sex crimes, and I cross-trained in fraud, because that was his main discipline. So, you had to do a little bit of everything. But yeah, when the opportunity presented itself at first, I was like, I don't want to do that because I don't want to see it. I've got 2 kids of my own, 8 and 11, and the thought of seeing that kind of stuff or being exposed to that kind of stuff, I thought to myself, I could never do it. But you quickly realize, and most people in law enforcement will tell you this, when it's business, it's business. Just like if you have to deal with something that's gross or that would turn your stomach. On your day off, you see something, disgusting like that, you might lose your lunch. When it's business and you're in your uniform and it's time to work, it's time to work. And the same thing is true when you deal with the child sex crime stuff. It's business. So you kind of shut off the dad part of you, the empathetic part of your brain, and you go into the mode of, I got to fix this for my for the kid that I'm dealing with, and I have to be strong and deal with it. So you just muddle through it, and you figure out a way to compartmentalize, and some of it's a little bit self-destructive, but you figure out a way to try and get through it for the victim's sake, not necessarily for your own sake. And unfortunately, that was the case with a lot of stuff in law enforcement.
Yeah, I remember Cindy, my first wife, talking about when she would be at the scene of an accident. Obviously she saw some pretty horrific things, like all cops do. I remember her saying that there was almost 2 aspects to it. The first was there was just so many things that had to be done that there was no time to really stop and think. And then there was other times where she said it almost felt like she was in a movie and almost watching the scene, watching the whole thing unfold from, I don't know if outside her body is the right way to put it, but like being able to objectively see herself in some kind of movie.
Yeah, I mean, she's right. The when you get to a scene or an accident, let's take a vehicle accident, for instance, that there's a list of things that have to be taken care of. There's a list of things that you have to do, from information to traffic control to medical safety, and those kind of play out like a script. You get so indoctrinated to doing those activities, you'll have to, at the end of the thing, did I get that guy's insurance information? Oh, well, yeah, I did, because I always do, because it's a part of my script. You don't realize you're saying stuff. And eventually, working with victims advocates or sex crimes or interviewing suspects, it becomes the same thing. You get indoctrinated into a routine, and you utilize that routine a lot to help shut down your brain. Like I said, I was a photographer, so I had the privilege / obligation to have to look at some of this stuff through a lens and have to get really close to, body parts or, stuff that's, that most people wouldn't want to get involved in and get close to. But it was sanitized by the fact that I was doing it through a camera. So it was almost like I wasn't really experiencing it because I was seeing it through a lens, and it was part of my job. And so I wasn't just looking at it, I was examining it, I was doing what I was supposed to do. So that's why I think a lot of cops go to that it's, like I said, when it's business, and your mind has the ability, and it's an amazing, to even shut off your sense of smell,
Really?
To subconsciously start breathing through your mouth and subconsciously, look past things and allow your mind not to focus on certain things. And unfortunately, that is short-lived. It's kind of like being able to shut off your short-term memory, but eventually you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and remember everything you saw, remember every smell that you smelled, and you get to relive it, but you're, 10 hours, 2 hours, 3 weeks, whatever it is, removed from the scene when you have that nightmare about it, and it's just like you were there. So you struggle through that, but everybody has it come in waves and droves on their own schedule.
So that's a good segue into the mental health implications of the job you were doing and in policing in general. But as you move through your career, like what were some of the impacts on your mental health that some of the things you saw or some of the experiences you had?
Well, I think the biggest one is, especially coming from where I came from. In Arnold, there wasn't. I was talking to my dad about this last night. We had a discussion about coming on the podcast, and he made the comment. He was like, "Well, Zach, you were just, you're in Arnold. It wasn't that bad." And I think a lot of guys do that because most of the law enforcement out there, if we're realistic, they're not in South Central LA or the South Side of Chicago or somewhere that's super high risk for law enforcement. They're just in a suburb of a city, and they're out there trying to do their best to keep things safe and keep things policed and do their job. So I think you could become complacent. So when you do experience violence, either with one of your other guys or your other gals in the force or directly to yourself, it comes as a huge shock to the system because of the complacency that builds. So that fear and trepidation is always there. And, I've had this discussion with friends and family members and stuff that are into that, have made the comment, well, I know a lot about cops because I got a lot of friends who are cops, or my dad was a cop, and unfortunately, you can't know unless you are. To experience that fear and that angst of walking up to a car at 3 a.m. and you get that tingly feeling in the back of your neck, and you're like, something's not right here, and before you know it, subconsciously, without even telling yourself to, you look down and your pistol's at your side, it's drawn and it's behind your leg, and you walk up and it's a delivery guy out looking for an address to deliver newspapers to. And you realize it was all nothing. But it's that constant ebb and flow of adrenaline and anxiety that you struggle through. And to learn how to control it is one of the hardest parts in law enforcement. So to learn how to shut it off is a big thing.
So as you had these experiences, did you start to deal with, on your time off or even at work? How did those experiences start to, I guess, play out in your own life? Did you suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder or anything like that? Or
I guess I was never diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, but I feel like I experienced it. And a lot of it was the shame of going, having to verbalize that, in 6 weeks on the police department, I was involved in my first shooting, and it wasn't anticipated. Like I said, we weren't in a high crime environment. This wasn't an everyday thing. When we had a shooting, everybody showed up, the chief of police, city council members, every guy on the detective bureau. So it was a big deal. It wasn't like it was hey, we had a shooting last night, officer involved. It's, where everybody's okay and it's no big deal. It was a big deal for us to be involved in a shooting. And so when that happened, I psychologically, I didn't even register. I was new. I was excited. And I remember vividly, I was back writing a report, and I was still in field training. I was back writing a police report, and my field trainer came up and said, hey, we got a call. It's a domestic violence third-party call in, which typically means that it's going to be over-exaggerated. So the story was there's a guy and a gal in a house with a small child. Supposedly the wife called her mom and said, hey, he's going to shoot me with a shotgun. We've been at it all night. He's intoxicated. I'm scared. Call the police. So the mom called the police, relayed this information to us. Typically, though, when there's that third party, it's like the telephone game. Things get kind of blown out of proportion or over-exaggerated. So we anticipated, okay, it's just going to be another drunk guy having a fight with his wife. We'll go take care of it. So we pull up. Well, back to what I was saying, the FTO came to me and told me, hey, this is what we got. You just stay here and finish writing. I'll go and I'll let you know what happens. I said, no, man, I want to go. It's a guy with a gun. I want to go. So I closed all my computer down and I ran off and hopped in the car and drove down there with him. And we get there and we're stacking up on the door, getting ready to go in. We could hear him yelling and screaming. And I remember a lieutenant knocking on the door, and we never announced police. That was the one thing that we made a mistake on. It was 3 a.m. We knocked on the guy's bedroom window. He answered the door with a shotgun, and everything ensued from there. And at the end of it, but like I said, I remember seeing the muzzle flash come off of the shotgun and watching my sergeant fall to the ground. I thought he was shot. So we went out and grabbed him by his vest and drug him behind the house. Come to find out, he had tripped on a tree. There was a little sapling about 2 feet tall, but it was timed perfectly. He was moving into position, saw the gun, kind of moved his footwork, got hung up in the tree. So we drug him off. But regardless of the fact that he was shot or not, I thought I watched him get killed. And I remember the corporal that was there not answering the radio initially after the first shots were fired. And And it was just because he was on the other side and that he was going through adrenaline and he wasn't listening. He was looking for cover, and all ended well. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got shot. But, it was a traumatic experience that I didn't realize was traumatic. So, because, I was just like, holy shit, I was just in a shooting, and it kind of hopped up. And I came home, and I remember taking my vest off and giving my wife a kiss and didn't say anything to her, didn't tell her what happened. I didn't want to scare her because I wasn't scared. Hell, it was cool, as far as I was concerned. And about 3 weeks later, we were serving an assault first warrant. And in the state of Missouri, assault first is the same as attempted murder. It's as much as you can assault somebody right up to the point where you kill them. And so it's a Class A felony. It's a big deal. Usually it's it's somebody that's either a complete asshole or they're really dangerous. So we lined up and we're stacked up on a door, and I kept hearing something rattle. And I was behind a row of dumpsters watching a back door, and I kept hearing, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I looked down. We carried H&K 40 USPs, and they were notorious for slide rattle because they had a metal slide to polymer body. And I looked down and it was my gun rattling because my hand was shaking like a leaf. And I remember grabbing onto my hand and holding it, trying to steady my nerves in case I had to shoot somebody. And that's the moment I realized that I was affected a little bit by what happened 3 weeks earlier because of that, or 3 months earlier rather, because of that feeling of anxiety that kind of came over me in a wave, and it was fear, and it took me a while to get over that, to stop, and then I started having nightmares about it, and in those nightmares it was obviously way more horrific than what had actually had happened. In the nightmares, I got shot, or my sergeant got shot, or I shot somebody, it blew up. And then that's when I started talking to my wife about it and told her what happened. She didn't show any fear, which was, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because maybe she just wasn't afraid that I was going to die. But she just listened, and she just sat there quietly and took it all in, and didn't, no judgment for me getting scared, just talked through it with me. And then before I knew it, those feelings of anxiety related to that initial shooting weren't as bad. Still had dreams periodically, but I still have dreams. I haven't been a cop in 2 years, and I still have nightmares about having to shoot someone or getting involved in a shooting or all the stuff that I did while I was on the road. But it's definitely less frequent, definitely less vivid, and those anxieties have subsided tremendously from what they originally were.
Do you know, I mean, I don't know if you talk to your coworkers about this stuff, but is it common or uncommon for guys or officers who are on the job to experience a situation like this and to be having nightmares to talk to their spouses? Or is there a kind of a belief sometimes that, fuck, just suck it up and, I don't want to scare my wife and that's how it's going to be. This is my cross to bear.
I guess that's the hardest thing about it, is that you don't talk about it at all with your guys.
Right.
It's a paramilitary organization. I mean, it's similar to with what your wife dealt with the provincial police. You're tough, and we've talked about this in the past. You're bred and raised and strengthened to be tougher than what you need to be. So you don't discuss it. I didn't even in the movies where they give you counseling. I didn't get anything. I didn't even get a day off. I finished my shift. So, but I wouldn't dare go to my FTO. My lieutenant never even asked me how I was. So he didn't say, hey, you've been on the job 6 weeks. You were just involved in a shooting. Are you okay? It was just assumed that I didn't get shot, so I was fine. So that's kind of the mindset. So I don't know if guys talk to their wives or not, because we never discussed it. Because God forbid anybody said that they were hurting, or God forbid anybody said they were afraid. Because think about what with what you did in your career, what 99.9% of people do for a living. There's no rule in their rule book that says they could be terminated for cowardice. Mm-hmm. There wasn't mine. There was a clause that I could be terminated if I showed cowardice, and that was a big thing. When I read my rules and regulations, I'm like, holy shit, I can be fired for being scared. And now they weren't saying that you can be fired for being scared. They were saying that you can be fired for being scared to the point where you said screw it and didn't show up.
Right.
Or one of your guys was screaming for help and you went the other way, which we had happen. We actually had that incident happen. We had a female officer that got a call for a person with a knife and that had actively assaulted somebody and stabbed somebody. So they pulled her video because it took her way too long to get to a call. They pulled her video, and she could have made a right and been there in 2 minutes. She made a left and took 14 minutes to get there, and went all the way around the city and came and come to find out, she was making sure that she wasn't the first person there, that she would have backup with her. So they fired her for cowardice, and because she put the victim's life in danger. She put other people's lives in danger, other officers' lives in danger, because she chose to take the long way to get there. And it's not something that they can have. You have to, even if you're scared. And there's a bunch of great videos about law enforcement, and I can't tell you exactly which one this was, but I know he was a chief for a sheriff in Florida, and he said that courage is walking into that situation and everything in your body, everything in your soul says run, to leave, and we don't. We keep going. So even though those warning signs go up, we keep pushing. And I know I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I guess you're getting used to that by now from talking to me.
No worries, man. That's what it's
all about. To answer your question, no, I don't know if guys talked about it because we didn't discuss it amongst ourselves. These guys we take a bullet for, but we didn't discuss our feelings, as crazy as that sounds.
That idea of courage is really, I think, really important because, I've been in these, I was in a situation once, you never know how you're going to react till you're faced with that moment. And we all have this idea of what we think we would like to do. But I was driving down the highway, it's probably about 10 years ago now. And it was a winter time, and this this SUV had taken, either just spun out going up this off ramp and just was tumbling end over end. And I'm the car right behind it. And what's going through my mind is, holy fucking shit, I'm going to be the first person here. There's nobody fucking behind me here. Fuck. So I pull over, and I'm telling you, man, it was like I was wearing cement boots trying to walk up to that car. I was scared shitless. There was glass broken everywhere. The SUV was upside down. There was fucking papers everywhere. And so I'm walking basically in slow motion up to this car. And then out of the blue, from behind, this woman, she had to be in her 60s. She was about 4'10", goes sprinting past me. She might as well have been wearing a cape. And she goes sprinting back. She jumps up on on the other side of the SUV, and she's, you call 911. And she's talking to the person who was alive in the car. And I was like, man, courage comes in all shapes and sizes, but I exhibited none of it. It was a period of reflection for me afterwards. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we're trained for situational awareness and sit reps and all, whatever you want to call it when we come upon a scene like that. But the average public's not. We have training on scene security and traffic security and get this and get that and do this, and your mind goes into that, get things done mode, and that's just what you do. But yeah, it's amazing when you're thrust upon a situation and you now have to take action that you definitely weren't anticipating. It can be a traumatic experience, to say the least.
So what are your thoughts on intuition? So do you believe that intuition is sort of a natural thing that we are all blessed with as part of being human?
I think that everybody's got a gut, to one extent or the other. And I think that you utilize that a ton in law enforcement, because a lot of times, when something doesn't seem right, it's probably not. And that, I think, is because people have a natural and an innate ability to read people. Mm-hmm. So when they get into a situation where they're that's thrust upon them to have to, to watch somebody or interact with somebody that's not in the right frame of mind, I think that we can detect that. And I think that everybody has that ability. They just don't realize it. So usually when they feel something's not right, they can pick it up. It's a natural thing, I think, because they can feel trepidation and fear. I mean, it goes back to a primal thing. Everybody says that dogs can smell fear and, animals can smell fear. I think to a certain extent we can too. We don't smell it like it's a pungent odor in the air, but we smell it just psychologically. So I think that to know when something's not right or have a feeling that something's off, I think that's absolutely a real thing. I think that, heck, we use it all the time. That, that whole TV saying of, going with your gut and, I got a gut feeling about this one, Lieutenant, something's not right here. That's a real thing. Whether it's admissible is a whole nother subject, but it definitely opens up avenues of investigation. It opens up avenues of speaking with certain people in a certain manner, and, interviewing skills are based a lot off of what your gut feelings are, or what your initial interpretation of a person's psyche or their story is. So yeah, I think that becomes a huge part of law enforcement and just in general.
Yeah. Did you have a problem, or maybe this is a police, not you specifically, but a policing question generally, but do cops have a hard time separating themselves from like their non-work life and their work life? And is that even something that they think they're supposed to do? And the reason I ask that question is because I remember Cindy being told, this is not what you do. It's who you are. It's like you're always a cop no matter what. And did you have a hard time separating those, or did you even want to separate them?
Without a doubt. I mean, and we've talked about this in the past. I mean, at first it was easy, because you're new to it and you put so much importance, you put so much stock in the badge, the uniform, the gun belt, the gun, so when you put all that stuff on, it's like putting on a suit of armor. You're a cop. You can feel it, I mean, and this sounds crazy, like I said, because people who haven't experienced this won't fully understand or get the scope of it. But when you feel the constriction of your vest on you, and you look pretty good in it because it hides your belly, and so you look at yourself in the mirror and you've got all your accoutrement on, your shiny badge and your collar brass and your whistle chain, and you feel like a genuine badass because you're a cop. You're out there. You're gonna kick ass. You're gonna take names if you feel like it. Because you're gonna do what you want to do. You're gonna go out there and inflict your will on the citizens of your city and protect them and covet them and do everything that a cop does. And so you feel that persona build when you put that uniform on, and then you get home and you take it off. And at first it was easy. I took off the uniform. Oh, I'm back to being just dad or husband or buddy or whatever it was. But the longer I did the job, the easier it was to get into the persona of being the cop, and the harder it was to get into the persona of being the dad again or the husband. Even after I take my uniform off, I can vividly remember situations where my wife would say, "Zach, you're not on duty anymore. Knock it off. Knock the look off." Because she said that, I mean, I couldn't see this because I wasn't, just like she couldn't know what it was like to be a cop. I have no idea what it was like to be married to a cop, but you do. So this is something where you have a lot more experience than I do. She could physically see a change in me when I would put my uniform on. The way I held my posture, the way I commanded with my voice, my facial expressions, everything changed. So when I would take it off, she could see that, the uniform was gone, but the physical, the emotional cop stuff was still there. And sometimes it would take her saying, "Hey, knock it off. You're off duty. Relax. Stop talking to the kids like they're perps. Calm down." It got increasingly difficult to make that separation once I became a detective. And it was for a whole litany of reasons beyond just wearing a uniform. It was, you get off duty and you're never really off because it's kind of like going in a computer when it goes to sleep. It's never really off. It's just hibernating. So the same thing is true when you're a detective, or and for law enforcement for that matter, period. But a detective is even more so, because you never know when the phone call is going to come in. That's going to be, "Hey, a kid got shot. We need you to come into work," and you need to go from sitting there having dinner with your family to cop mode in 0 to 60. And so you just let the motor idle. You never really shut it off because you never know when you're going to have to rev it up. And God forbid it doesn't start, if that makes any kind of sense. So it becomes increasingly difficult to make that transition to civilian life with your kids or with your wife or friends because you're always a cop. And then there's the public perception too. When you get introduced to at a party, if you and your wife go to a party and a buddy comes up and says, "Hey man, you got to meet my friend Jason. He's a guy." You're just a guy. You're a life coach. You're a speaker. You got all these great attributes about you, career things that you've done. But for most people, you're just Jason McKenzie. When I would get introduced at a party, "Hey, you got to meet my buddy Zach. He's a cop." So it was always a layer there. Like I always knew in the back of my mind, if I screwed up and got into a car accident that hurt somebody, or got into it with my wife and it went too far, God forbid, or whatever, it would never be local St. Louis resident Zach Rackovan does this. It was going to be former or current police detective does this. Because not only do we literally take on that DNA and become a police officer from inside to out, but the public anticipates it of us too. We never got a break from being held to a higher standard. Most people, you go to work, you get in trouble while you're at work, you get disciplined while you're at work. You get in trouble while you're at home, you get disciplined by somebody else, you don't get disciplined by your job. Whereas I knew that if I screwed up on duty or off duty, in my city, out of my city, that I was subject to disciplinary action at work because of something I may have done 5 states over on my vacation. It doesn't matter. So you really get indoctrinated into that you are always a cop because you're always held to a standard. You're always expected to act. You're always expected to act within, to bring honor to your profession and your badge no matter what. You're certainly never expected to bring shame to it, no matter what situation you're in, whether you're working or not working. So it's a mixture of your own doing, becoming, that you are a cop, you're always a cop, but a lot of it's public perception and the public pressures to maintain that level of integrity and that level of fearlessness and that level of activity and whatever you want to wrap it up into all the time, because you're always a cop. I mean, think how many times you see in the movies where the cop saves the day in the bank when he's off duty, just going there to pay his bills, and a robber comes in. Usually the cop gets shot, but it's one of those things where you're taught that you're always on duty. Hell, the law in the state of Missouri said we're supposed to act in the presence of a violent felony. So I mean, you're a cop, you're going to follow the law, which meant I carried my gun, which meant I was ready to act. Even though that sometimes you start thinking tactically, well, hell, that could put my family in danger. If I can just lay down and let the crime happen and look at the dirt like the criminal's telling me to do and don't get engaged in it and not bring attention to my daughter that might be with me. But no, I'm supposed to act in the presence of a violent felony. Now they've amended it to where if it's safe and deemed tactically plausible and all that, but it still doesn't change your mindset.
Right.
If something happens, you're gonna react and hope to God that doesn't bring attention to where your kid might be sitting. So yeah, it's a spooky thing that you talk about that delineation between on duty and off duty. It's I don't know. It's tough. To this day. I'm still a cop, even though I'm retired. I spent long enough doing it that I still identify with the policemen around me. And it's kind of weird. It's like being on the outside looking in, because with the cops, it's a real close knit group. And now I got this big goofy beard and there's literally a physical embodiment of me not wanting to shave anymore because I don't have to. And I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, man, if I was still in the job, I would look at me and think, what a shit bum. Mm-hmm. This guy with this big huge beard and driving an old car now and all this stuff. It's amazing to see the way current law enforcement interprets me when I tell them, hey, I'm a retired detective out of St. Louis, and they're looking like, this guy with that beard. But the cool thing is when you tell them, hey man, I got to stop shaving, so I did, and they all go, I completely get it, because I don't know how it is up in Ontario, but because it's cold up there, they got to cover their face just to keep from dying from the weather.
Yeah,
but down here in the state, you can't. The most you can have is a super sweet cop stash at most places, and I couldn't pull it off. My wife told me I looked way too much like the people I was investigating if I had my child molester stash on.
But you tried.
Well, the Cardinals went to the World Series, and we all made the agreement that, well, they didn't go, they didn't make it, but we all said, hey, none of us are gonna shave until the Cardinals are out of the playoffs. And I didn't think about this because even though I'm a huge baseball fan, the playoffs take forever.
Oh yeah.
So, we're going on like a month, and I got this fruit mold on my lip. Now it's super luxurious and awesome, but it's only good because it's anchored by this gigantic beard. Because in its own right, it can't stand on its own. It has to be anchored by this voluptuous beard that surrounds it. So, yeah, it was. My wife was very happy when they finally got eliminated out of the playoffs.
It can't stand on its own. I love it. It's funny. I think here, like for Cindy, when she was off the job, like one thing that's interesting is they don't take their guns home. Right. So she would leave her gun at the detachment. Oftentimes she wouldn't even drive to the detachment in her uniform. She would just throw it in her bag and get changed there. So I think that maybe helped the delineation. But I think too, what happens is that people don't think about, like, it's funny when you get put in these situations in your personal life. Like, for example, here up here, like nobody gives a shit if people smoke dope, for example, but it's technically illegal. So you go to a party. And, people know you're a cop and it's all awkward because somebody, goes outside and they're smoking a joint and you don't actually care about it. But, and it's just, and what ends up happening is you just isolate yourself, right? Because it's like, as much as you don't care about that situation, it's weird and awkward. You don't want to be in it. And I think it's just little things like that, too, that can lead to that, staying amongst your own. It just makes it easier and simpler.
Yeah. And I think, it's hard to describe to a school teacher what it's like to get into a fist fight with a suspect. It's hard to describe to somebody that works in an office what it's like to get woke up at 3 a.m. to go handle an automobile accident where somebody passed away. So it's easy to talk to another cop about that. So I think we find ourselves, gravitating to first of all, we got goofy ass schedules. Mm-hmm. We work terrible hours at terrible times and terrible weather. So do the other guys that are with us. And the guys that are with us also have the same goofy time off. So I think you you quickly surround yourself with other policemen because, number one, you don't feel like you got to be on stage or you're not going to be examined. Because when you go, it's inevitable. Like, you've never had the experience unless you've had lunch with your wife when she was in uniform of eating like a zoo animal. You're at Denny's or whatever, midnight place grabbing a thing of pancakes, and it's like, look at them. They eat just like us. Well, yeah, we're normal people. And I love the guy the 2 a.m. drunk guy that comes up, hey, officers, I hate to bother you, and I don't want to interrupt you. You want to look, and you can't say this, but you want to look at him and go, but you're going to, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then they talk about how they were, this cop wrote him a bullshit ticket. And, it's like, man, I'm just trying to eat my dinner. So you don't have that when you're surrounded by other cops. You don't get, hey, man, tell me you ever shot anybody? Yeah, and if I did, I wouldn't want to talk to you about it. Or, hey, what's the scariest call you've ever been on? Well, thanks for making me relive it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because other cops won't ask you those questions. And, the other thing is, and it's well documented, and it always gets some poor guy in trouble on the evening news, but we have six senses of humor. And it's been, like I said, well documented in the psychological field that one of the ways to deal with trauma is through humor, and not only through humor, but through group humor, because it allows guys to connect and feel like they're, it's okay. And so we'll be standing around a dead body laughing and joking.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds so fucked up, but it's therapeutic when you're there and you're like, I can choose to think about two things. I can think about the dirty joke that this guy just said, or the funny thing that he just said. I can have a release of tension and anxiety through laughter, or I can sit here and stew in the fact that there's an 8-year-old whose head splattered all over the highway. And that's not going to make it. And then I've put a sheet on him because I'm waiting for somebody to come pick up the body. I can choose to think about that, or I can choose to laugh and have a jovial time and detach myself from the trauma that my mind's experiencing. Unfortunately, the problem is you're still experiencing it. You're just masking it with something else. But people don't get it. So they see, on the news, and there's a, News Channel 5, and there's this dead body laying on there with a sheet over, and here's this group of asshole cops laughing and joking around. And they're thinking, how could they have this kind of mindset? They should be somber. We're not funeral directors. We're not paid to be somber. But, and you explain to somebody, man, that's how we cope. And they still don't get it because they've never experienced that. That you have to go into that out-of-body space to detach yourself. Like I remember vividly my first suicide that I went to. A guy shot himself with a shotgun. It was an incredibly gory scene, and I don't know how gory I can be, but there was an eyeball that was stuck to a wall.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it's bad. And my sergeant said, "Hey, you need to be on point with this." I said, "Why? What's going on?" He goes, "I'm just telling you, you need to make sure you dot all your I's, cross all your T's, don't screw up." Well, why? What's going on, Sarge? He goes, because he's watching us. And he looks up at that eyeball, and I lose it. And I'm thinking, man, how fucked up are we? Why is that funny? That guy's eyeball's right there. But then I realized exactly what he was doing. He saw me spiraling.
Yeah.
My head was swimming. There's guts, there's brain. It was bad. But that broke the tension, and I was fine. Then it became business, and I got my business done. I did what I was there to do, and I honored the victim by getting my job done. Mm-hmm. Whether I was making fun of him or not, it was, one of those things where psychologically we had to get through it. And I think that's, like I said, a lot of people don't get that, but cops do. So, and I'm sure you saw it with your wife when she would get around her cop friends, they would talk about grotesque stuff, eyeballs, brains, the latest crime that they had to deal with. And I don't know, in Canada it's like stealing a moose or something, but the latest thing that they had to go through. And so it became okay. They were in a safe spot to talk about that and live that anxiety out verbally or through comedy or whatever it was. Whereas you can't do that at your wife's book club. You can't say, hey, man, you guys would not believe what I saw this week. But you can go to the tavern with your buddies and have that same conversation and feel okay, feel normal. Whereas you don't get that when you're out with just regular people.
Yeah, and I guess that sense of brotherhood and, how other people don't understand, that must make it even more difficult to leave the world of policing, which is, I think, an interesting segue into, what that was like for you to step away from that brotherhood, that, thin blue line or the blue wall or whatever they call it, into a completely different world. So how was that? It
was traumatic. It was liberating and traumatic all at the same time. because we haven't even, highlighted the fact of, interoffice politics and anxiety and all that stuff that existed within the police work that had nothing to do with violence, had nothing to do with criminals, and the worst part, it was all self-created. So, when I stepped away from all the violence and all that stuff, that we experienced as policemen. I also stepped away from all the anxiety, but I never got away from the anxiety. I got away from the violence. I wasn't scared to go about my daily business, but the fear and anxiety of judgment and what my family would think, what my friends would think, what, God forbid, what the policemen would think that I considered or counted friends. And I have to say that's a big thing within law enforcement is that, these guys you take a bullet for, and I said that earlier, and that was serious. If I had an opportunity to save some guy's life, I'd risk my own to do it, just like I would my daughter's or my wife's. It was just something you kind of signed up for. You never signed the paperwork, but you just did. You didn't realize you did it, but when you got the badge, that all went with it, that you were willing to put your life on the line for another. And, these same guys that I would do that for, we had 51 guys on our police department. I continuously talked to 2. I maintained that relationship with 2 guys, and they're of the people that I knew. I realized I had a lot of acquaintances at the police department. I had a lot of brothers in blue or blue wall, like you said, but that extended as long as you were part of that family. Now that you're out, it's kind of like Shawshank. Once you got out of it, it was you escaped and nobody wanted to look at you or think about you because they were still inside. And my detective partner, I still talk to on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, he just sent me a text message and interrupted me, even though I told him I was busy. And, so I still have that connection with him. So I still kind of get tidbits of the job through him. But leaving was hard. I wasn't joking when I said that we take that DNA, we take the red pill and, what was that, with Morpheus, the Matrix, you become part of it. And it doesn't easily separate. And a matter of fact, I go on a limb and say it never separates. I think it has a physiological and a psychological change that you can't ever shake. And I know that I evidence that to be true because I still sit with my back to the wall at a restaurant. My dad still does, and he was a military policeman. My wife's uncle, who's been retired for 5 years, we fight over that chair when we go to a restaurant. Neither one of us are on the job. Hell, I'm not even carrying a gun. I just want to see it coming. You know what I mean? So I think that there's so much indoctrination in your body and your soul and your mind when you're on the job that separation is never 100% complete. Like I've stopped, roadside, not on duty, or no longer a cop, to try and help. Most people don't because of fear or anxiety. Like, hey, there could be a serial murderer in that trunk. I don't want to stop and offer help, which is a sad evidence of our society. But, I still having that, no, I have to stop. I was trained to do this. What if somebody's hurt? There's been an accident. I still, even though I'm not paid to do this anymore, God still bestowed me with that training and that education and that ability. I need to help. So to say that, what the process was like, I don't know. It's not done. It's gotten better. I've been able to separate myself. I've been able to, and this sounds weird, but I'm now being okay with the words coming out of my mouth that when somebody asks me what I do for a living, I'm a professional photographer, as opposed to saying I'm a retired detective, because that was just what it was. It never stopped. Just because it transitioned to retired, it didn't change the way I felt and how I interacted on a daily basis. I still saw crime. Your shithead detector never goes away. I figured that out, and it doesn't lessen either. Because you can be at Walmart in Bowling Green, Kentucky, not in your own city, and you can be like, from across the grocery aisle, go, that guy is on meth, and I can see it. But there's nothing you can do about it, so you just go on about your daily business. You just share the knowledge that we both know, the guy that's on it and me, that he's on meth, because it's something that never goes away. And I don't know if I'd want it to, because I kind of like having these like superhuman abilities, but it's definitely something that still exists.
Is it a problem? Is it a problem for you or other cops as part of the transition to go from like just being John Q. Public, or to losing power? That must be a big deal, I would think, in some cases.
Yeah, I don't know if it's losing power, because I was never the power trip kind of guy. That wasn't my motif on the police department or when I interacted with the public. But you definitely feel different. You don't have it's a lot of responsibility when they pin that badge on you. And it's a ceremony. It's a thing. It's just like on TV. They want you to feel pride in it. So when that's gone, like for me, I still feel I have a lot of pride of what I did for a living. I'm very proud of my service to the, with the police department, but I don't get to tell anybody about it anymore because it's weird. You don't run up to somebody and say, "I'm a retired policeman." It's not. You don't ever get that accolade anymore because you don't do it. You don't wear the uniform. So losing that power, and like I said, I don't know if it would be as much power as just a lot of pride. I was always, I was proud to tell people what I did for a living, and I still am. I mean, there's a few people that can be counted to say that they make money in motorsports, and I'm one of them, and I'm super proud of that. But I was really proud that I was a policeman. I was really proud that I was a detective. When I got to introduce myself on a call or whatever as, "Hi, I'm Detective Rackovan, this, I'm here to help you." There was a sense of pride that was associated with that. And I guess you kind of lose some of that, you lose that prideful nature because, photographers are not saving the world. Nobody ever said, "Man, this photographer's a hero." Whereas within law enforcement, we were, and I still believe that those guys are. Whether they, save a life that day, because there's a lot of stuff that, a lot of preventative stuff that happens that nobody will ever know about. They may stop a robbery that they didn't even know was going to happen because they were just there and present and cognizant of what their surroundings were. So when you lose that, it's definitely a change in your I wouldn't say self-worth, but I mean, it'd be in that realm.
So you left the police force and then you decided to live a completely different life. So, I mean, it's more than being a photographer. It's changing your entire family's life and being a photographer who travels with his family all around the world. So maybe describe to the audience what you're doing specifically and what it's been like.
Yeah, I definitely went split crazy when I decided to retire. Me and my wife were young. We're not young, but I'm 34. She's 35. Actually, she turns 35 in about 8 days here. So we didn't have a pension. I mean, I had a pension, but it was small. It was minuscule. So I had to maintain a livelihood. So thus the photography stuff. But one of the things that I knew is, we had, aside from the trauma and whatever else with the law enforcement stuff, there was a lot of overspending and there was a lot of self-medicating with, buying things and, collecting hobbies like I mentioned earlier. So I knew that I had to make a change in my lifestyle if I wanted to chase a dream to be a professional photographer and chase this, this idea of not having to be in law enforcement because you really felt, they really made it feel like you were, you're stuck. You're going to be a lifer. You got 30 years and then you can get out and do with what you want. And one of the things that really resonated with me was that we have the highest rate of mortality after retirement of any profession. So I'm thinking, man, I'm going to wait 30 years and deal with all this shit for 30 years to die 4 years after I retire and not see all, everybody waits in the U.S. They're going to get old. They're going to buy a motorhome. They're going to travel. They're going to see the country. But I don't want to do that when I'm 75 years old. However old Social Security is going to be by the time I get there, probably going to have to be 80. So I didn't want to wait until I was in the eclipse of my life to go experience life. And I'm thinking, well, why would I want to deprive my kids of this? I don't want them to sit in Arnold, Missouri their whole life until they're in their 70s or 80s and they get to go and travel and experience life. I want to do this now. But I knew it's like, well, we can't afford it, So I wanted this lavish, jet set lifestyle of going out and traveling and seeing the country, but I knew that we couldn't afford it. So one of the ways that we could afford it is if we just lived on the road. So we made the decision to sell everything that we own, cars, house, stuff. I mean, you would not believe. You want to talk about taking a personal accountability check of your spending habits, of what you get into, start selling everything you own. And realizing, you bought this widget or whatchamacallit for $200 and you're trying to convince somebody, give me $20
Right.
for it just so I can get rid of it. And I had 75 model airplanes. And I mean, remote control line, helicopters, quad, because for like 2 weeks I was into RC planes and I went crazy. So, I had this big self-realization of what it meant to the value of a dollar and spending money and all this stuff as we sold and liquidated. I mean, when I say we sold everything, we have 3 tubs of stuff. My wife's parents are both passed away, so she's got a few things from them that we were going to eventually give to our daughters. A couple things from a son that had passed away, and a few objects and odds and ends that were family heirlooms, if you will, that we didn't want to get rid of. Those tubs are in my dad's garage in St. Louis. Everything else is either on the road with us or is in a dumpster or somebody else owns it now. So we decided to take to the road to change our lifestyle. if I wanted to live like somebody else, I had to live like nobody else, which meant we had to get rid of some stuff. We had to really purge our lifestyle. And we got our finances on track. We paid off a ton of debt. And we realized, holy crap, you don't have to make a ton of money if you don't have to spend a ton of money. Because I had this big, huge house. So since I had this big, huge house and had a big, huge mortgage payment, I needed to, of course, fill it with crap, because that's the American way. Park your $40,000 car in the driveway and then fill your garage up with trash. And
No shit.
so once I broke away from that mindset, I'm like, I used to drive a little sports car. I had a sports car. I had my race car. We had a nice minivan. We had a nice SUV. And I'm thinking, once we got, I'm like, I don't need any of this stuff. I don't need this fancy car. I mean, I'm surrounded by exotic race cars all the time. If I want to get behind the wheel of a car, I'll just ask a guy. So I sold my nice car, my race car, the minivan, and we bought a 1999 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It was a rolling dirt bucket. But it got from point A to point B. It had that one option that no car on the dealer's lot has. For us, for that matter, is no payment. We had no debt associated with it. I paid cash for it, and I owned it, and it was mine. Other than having to pay to fix it constantly, we didn't have any debt with it. And that became the story of our life. If we wanted something, we paid for it in cash. If we needed something, then we could find the funds for it. If we didn't, it wasn't something that we should buy. And we had that epiphany that, now we can chase a dream and do what we want, because we no longer are beholden to, and I hate to say the man, but it wasn't that. It was the idealistic lifestyle of consumption. We didn't have to feel obligated to buy stuff. We didn't have to feel obligated to spend or go into debt, because we released ourselves from it. So now don't get me wrong, I will blow some money, but I'll blow it on a gas tank to drive from here to Zion, Utah, and see what was probably one of the most breathtaking views I've ever seen. But I got to take my kids with me, and that was a huge thing. This past eclipse that happened, I didn't have to worry about asking off from work. I didn't have to worry about, whether or not I was going to be able to make things logistically work with projects or whatever. I just didn't go to work that day because I own my own company. I do my own thing. And I got to experience that with my 80-year-old grandparents, which probably, if we're realistic, won't make the next one in 35 years. It's going to be, me and my kids, hopefully. But I got to watch my kids see that, and that was worth everything. That was worth losing the cars. We didn't lose anything. We sold it. But, that was worth the change in lifestyle, because I didn't see that stuff when I was on the job. If I had to work that day, I had to work that day. There wasn't, I wasn't going to get off for that. So to be able to be present in my kid's life and make this change and work 2 days a week as opposed to 5 or 6 or 7 days a week at times, to be around them, I quickly realized I had pretty cool kids. I didn't know them. I worked so much in such weird hours. There was times for literally a month on end, I would go to work at 2 o'clock and get home at 10 o'clock at night. Well, they'd get off school at 3 p.m. and they'd be in bed by 9. I didn't see my kids until the weekend. And then usually I was working on a racetrack somewhere taking pictures, so I got to see them for literally a few hours a week. So I lost touch with who they were. So when I made this transition, I have cool kids. They're smart. They're fun to hang out with. My wife is amazing. And I didn't know these people. I lived with them. It was like having roommates. So imagine going thrust from living in a 3,000 square foot house with roommates to living in a 400 square foot motorhome and being very involved in each other's lives. It was a huge transition piece for us, but I wouldn't trade any of it for anything. It's been a liberating experience. It's been, absolutely mind altering about what's important to your life. You quickly realize that stuff has absolutely zero bearing on how happy you are. It'll get me the fix. Don't get me wrong. I am a huge dopamine addict when it comes to spending money, and I still struggle with it. But nothing compares to getting to see your kids grow up. Nothing compares to putting priorities in place that you actually feel good about. Like at a deep cellular level, like I feel proud of the education that my wife gives my kids, when I help out a little bit. But because we're homeschooling them, I feel proud about the experiences that they're having. And I hope that, and I pray that, when they're in their 30s or 40s and they're having kids and they're deciding how they're going to educate them and raise them, that they look back fondly on their childhood and said, man, my dad took me everywhere that I wanted to go in the country. I got to see everything that I could ever possibly want to see. It's a pretty cool world we live in. Unfortunately, most of us don't get to see it. So it's definitely an eye-opening experience.
No, you're preaching to the choir, man. You know, it's funny. I'm going to have a guy on the podcast, and he's really well known for the idea of simplicity parenting, and I love the lesson you're teaching your kids, that a full life and adventure and presence and learning, they don't revolve around the things that you have. You know, I look at some family members who may or may not listen to this podcast, so I won't name them, but, you know, and their kids, although when they hear me say this, they'll know who they are, but their kids basically get up in the morning, they're 4 and 6 years old. The first thing they're on their fucking iPads immediately, like just constant stimulation. I'm pretty proud of, you know, we haven't obviously taken it to the level you have, but our kids, you know, we sent them to a private school, Waldorf school, a very different teaching philosophy, much more oriented around hearts, hands, and minds. There's no technology in the school. You know, for the longest time in the backyard, like literally, man, all they had was a fucking rope hanging from a tree. And watching them over the years, just what they did with that thing. It was just, we'd stand with a cup of tea and watching them out the back window going, holy fuck, man. God, that's crazy. You know, and eventually we got them a trampoline, but that's it. And we just don't buy them a lot of things. And they're older now, 13 and 12. And so they've got some, you know, technology in their life or whatever. But it is, I don't know. I'm just a huge fan of the idea of simplicity parenting, of valuing your things, of being present. And I really think that, you know, especially when you look at the mental health problems, all these kids, you know, they have ADD. I mean, come on. No shit. They have ADD, whatever the fuck that even is, you know, like, God, just take a step back, be present with your kids, put your devices down and stop thinking that the next thing is like, I remember my mom, and I love you, mother, because I know she listens to this, but I remember one time when the kids were, you know, maybe 5 and she would bought them, yeah, it's a typical Walmart toy, the disposable Dora thing or whatever it was. And I'm like, and it made all these noises. And I'm like, oh my God, please never, ever buy something like this again, because it's disposable garbage, you know. And I'm not a huge environmental hippie, but it's not good for the earth. It's not good for the kids. They don't need all that stimulation. And I don't know if you feel this way, but kids, as much as they might think that they don't like boredom, man, it is the playground for using their imagination and creativity.
It's funny you mention the word boredom, because in our house it's a 4-letter word. You know, and the kids know if they come up and say, "Dad, I'm bored." Oh, you're bored? Oh, well, great. I've been looking for somebody to dump the RV tanks. Oh, you're bored? There's dishes that need to be, because we don't. You know, you talk about going back to a simplistic lifestyle. We don't have a dishwasher.
Yeah.
and to a 9-year-old, or well, now she's 11. That was a huge, because her job's doing the dishes. So she had to learn that she's never ever done the dishes. She's rinsed them off and put them in a machine that does them for her. But now she's got to do actually wash stuff. So, you know, with ours, you talk about simplicity. I mean, our kids have technology in their lives. Hell, their dad's a huge nerd. I've got 4 laptops. I mean, a bunch of excess that I don't need. But one of the things that I did, like, for instance, you know, when you're self-educating your kids and you really start to learn who they are and how they interact and what turns their crank or whatnot. And I quickly realized that, you know, Zoe, my oldest, she craves conversation. She's just like her dad. She craves connection and meaningful connection, not just, you know, talking to kids. Because she can't talk to an 11-year-old. She has to talk to a 35-year-old because she craves that, a high level of intellectual interaction. So when we were out in Arizona last winter, you know, we're literally living in the desert. We rigged up our coach with solar panels, and so we lived off the land, for lack of a better term, and would truck water in and truck waste out and all that stuff. And it was a neat way to live, because you really quickly self-accounted for how you impacted the environment. And I'm like you, I'm not some super environmentalist guy, but I don't want to trash the joint off if I don't have to. But at the same time, you quickly realize what you consume as a human, you know, energy and water and all that stuff, because you're living off of finite resources. So she still craved this interaction. So I said, well, let's go get our ham licenses. She said, what's a ham? Why do we want? I don't want meat. I want to talk to people. I said, I know ham is about amateur radio. And it all started. We bought a $40 radio, and it's actually sitting on my desk. I'm looking at it. $40 Baofeng radio off of Amazon. And it's just a little 2-meter walkie-talkie. And I remember seeing and I had it for a while because I used it to listen to cars at the racetrack and stuff. And And I remember seeing an article that the space station was going to be talking to some students in La Paz County, which is where we were at, and that there was a downlink frequency. And we didn't even have our licenses. So I tuned into this frequency because you don't have to have a license to listen. And sure as shit, I'm listening to astronauts in friggin' space.
Wow.
Talk to kids on the Earth that were 10 miles away from where we were at. And it blew her mind. I mean, you literally could see her head just go to talk on a walkie-talkie and listen to people in space. So we went out and we got our licenses, and she's a technician class operator. She got her license when she was 10, which means she can talk on walkie-talkies and stuff. But with the integration of the internet, I mean, she can talk around the world on that walkie-talkie through a gateway that we have in the coach. And she leads a Friday night net a group gathering in Bowling Green, Kentucky. No matter where we're at, she runs it. I mean, at 11 years old, she's talking to these grown men, and we'll get to that in a second. But talking to all these people, having all this interaction and meaningful conversation about something that she's really interested in, and it's technology that we've had since the 40s. And it's not an iPad, it's not Skype, it's not, and to teach her that this, some of this isn't internet dependent, that this is something that she can build an antenna, because she has, she helped me build a J-pole antenna when we were in Arizona, and, so there's all this stuff that she's learned. And the whole time, the best part of it is she doesn't even realize she's learning stuff. She's just having fun. She's just having an interaction. And the guys that are involved in this hobby are so helpful to her, because she's a young lady and they want to get her and keep her engaged and all that stuff. So you find stuff like that when you're able to slow down and spend time with them and look at stuff like you sound like you've created a backyard torture chamber with a trampoline and a rope. I call trampolines kid killers because they scare the crap out of me, because they always end up flying off and landing on their head. But you take that time with them and realize that it's like you take your kid to the local corral or Golden Corral or Ponderosa or whatever big Vegas buffet version of a restaurant you have, and you sit them down with a plate and go, okay, what do you want? Well, shit, I don't know. There's 5 million things to eat. But if you make them one good wholesome meal, put it in front of them and say, hey, what do you want to eat? Well, I guess I'll eat this. It's right in front of me. So you talk about that ADD. We expose our kids to so much crap, and then we expect them to pay attention to stuff. If there's 35 million blinking LEDs in front of them, how can you help them? How do you expect them to focus on a book? You know what I mean? So if you have this opportunity to eliminate extraneous crap in their lives, to eliminate distraction, and create an environment for them that's wholesome, and it's not only wholesome, but it's just good stuff. It's just good stuff to put in front of them. A lot of it is just being aware and conscientious of the beautiful things that are around us. Like when we travel. To go out and have your kids be rather, they have iPads and stuff like that, but they'd rather stand outside and look at a mountain and play literally in Arizona, they'd play in the dirt, stacking rocks, and they took a bunch of scraps and built a little hut out in front of our camper, and they'd sit out there and play. Their iPads would sit here and go dead, because they got to be out in the, in their element, in the environment, and see cacti and all this other stuff. And it was because we eliminated distraction, not because we eliminated choices. We just eliminated distraction from them and allowed them to really focus in on what was neat. And this stuff's been cool for millions of years. The Rocky Mountains have been a majestic sight since the dawn of time. We just you got to just knock some of the smoke away and let people see them. And that's what we've done for the kids, is just eliminate their distractions to allow them to focus on what's important. And when they're older, if they want to get all hopped up on jujubes and play video games, they can do that. But right now they're going to experience stuff, and that's kind of our mindset with them, is that as long as we're footing the bill for it, they're going to see stuff that we think is important to them, and they can decide it later on in life through therapy that we were terrible parents. But for right now, they're going to get a piece of what we consider a dream, that we didn't get. I mean, I had great parents. I had fantastic parents, and my wife, for the most part, she had some struggles with her parents with addiction and stuff, but we didn't have these opportunities, and it wasn't because of a lack of effort on my parents' behalf. It was because they were just like everybody else. They were chasing that brass ring of a house and 2 cars and, debt and everything else. And so they were enslaved to having to work. Well, we don't have that problem anymore, because we changed the way we live our lifestyle. So hopefully our kids see the value in it when they become older and they make some of these same choices for their family.
Oh, I love it, man. That's great. I was going to talk about the conversation we had last time, which is about some of the things that you want to do post-policing and outside of photography, but I could actually literally talk to you for hours. So why don't we? Would you be willing to come on the podcast again, and maybe we could talk about that?
Sure, this time I'll be prepared.
People will be able to see the amazing sound quality from one to the other.
Well, what's crazy is midstream, my laptop still hasn't come on. I don't know if it's broken or whatnot. I think there's some sort of virus that I've caught from your Zencast. I had to plug in an external monitor so I could just see what we're doing, because it was driving me, even though it was still working, it was driving me crazy that I couldn't see it. So yeah, absolutely, I'd love to come back on and talk about that. I've been, some of the reading selections that you've given me and some of the things you've provoked in my mind have been at one point exhilarating, at the other point, have kept me up at night. So it's good. It's all good stuff. It's just, I'm going 100 miles an hour. So yeah, the opportunity to talk about it would be
I'd
fantastic.
love that, brother. So, hey, listen, for the audience, I guess in your transition out of policing and this very different life you're living now, what's the one thing I think that you found the most surprising or unexpected?
That, and we had talked about this at length when we had a coaching session, which was, by the way, and I haven't had a chance to thoroughly thank you for that. It truly was life changing, and it's made.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Leaps and bounds. It's only been a week since it happened, and things have already changed for me, and it's been huge. But one of the things I said in that is that I took a lot of value in that badge. And I don't care if it's you're a cop or if you're a firefighter or you're a computer programmer or whatever. You put a lot of self-worth into what you do and how you earn your living. And I used to think that my kids looked up to me because I was a hero. Because they called me. They told me, Dad, you're a hero. You're a policeman. And I used to think that I was so afraid to leave it. Not just for the kids, but for, my wife. And my dad was proud. My grandparents were proud. My wife was proud of the fact that her dad was, or not her dad, her dad was a cop, but that her husband was a policeman. And I was afraid I would lose that. And then I quickly realized that my kids weren't proud of me because I was a cop. They didn't look up to me because I was a cop. I didn't make them feel safe because I was a policeman. I made them feel safe and proud, and I was looked up to because I was their dad. And my wife loved me because I was her husband, not because I was a policeman. And my dad was proud of me because I was a good man, and I was just in my actions and had a moral compass, and I raised my family, the way he would hope that I would have raised them. And I was a good husband and a good dad. That's why he was proud of me. My grandparents, the same thing. So I quickly realized that the adoration that people have for you isn't always tied up in what you label yourself or what you think it is. If you're living through your life thinking that you're going to disappoint your family or friends or loved ones because you're going to make a decision to chase a dream or stop chasing a dream, because sometimes it's just not right. Sometimes what you think, it was my dream to be a cop. I was in the mortgage industry. I made great money. I mean, money hand over fist, especially compared to being a cop. But I never forgot that calling, and I wanted to go to being a policeman, and I made the transition. But it was a dream that was very poignant and it served me well in my life, but it wasn't my entire life scope or goal. And when I realized that I could have multiple dreams in my life and I didn't have to stick to one thing. It's like if you go to a buffet and you pick out the best thing on the menu because that's what you're going to eat, but you don't want to eat it the rest of your life. You want to change stuff. And I didn't have and I had shame in that. And once I did the transition, I took that leap, I realized there's no shame in wanting to chase other dreams and make well for yourself and make well for others and try to experience stuff. And I quickly realized that, like I said, my family loved me for me. They were proud of me for me. It had nothing to do with the badge that I was wearing. So if I could say one thing is, if you've got a dream, chase it. Don't live in a box so you can chase your dreams of being an amateur motorcycle racer like I was about to do. But, if it's realistic and it can benefit your family, and I don't mean just financially. I made more money as a policeman by far. But my kids wouldn't. You asked my daughter if she would ever want me to go back to being a policeman so she could have a room and get more crap at Christmas, she'd say in a heartbeat no. She likes having her daddy safe. She likes having her daddy home, and she doesn't put any value in that stuff anymore because we taught her.
Hey, is she there?
So I think that's what. She's in the back bedroom. Well, it's close. Yeah, she's right next to me. We live in a camper. Come on. But yes, she's here.
You should ask her so we can hear her say. I'm just kidding. No, that's great, man. I think that's that. What a realization. To realize it was never really about the uniform or about the badge or about the position. It was just all about you. I mean, what a liberating thing to realize, and I love the connection you're creating with your kids, man. It's absolutely beautiful, and I think you're a great example for Great example for people. So listen, brother, for people that want to find out more about you, I know you're still building out some of the social media stuff, but about your photography, like what's the best way for them to do that or to get in touch with you?
I always feel so corny when I say, well, we're on Instagram at this, but no, if they have interest in seeing what we do photography wise, my website is abi-photo.com, and my wife made me set up an Instagram account because, like I said, it's not my thing, but I guess it's the @_ABI photo, and ABI stands for a borrowed image. That's what we thought we were going to be real artsy when we got started, and then I realized that was a crazy long name, so we just ABI photo now. And then the cool thing, what I'm actually proud of, is I made again, this makes me feel like a dweeb. I made a blog about our travels, and it was never intended for anybody else to see this. It was for family and friends and stuff to kind of see where we're at and what we're doing. And I feel terrible that I haven't updated it in a while, but it's 8feet12paws.com. So 8, the number 8, and then feet like feet on your body, and 12, the number 12, and then paws like dog paws. Because not only, we haven't even touched this, and Jason, you may not even know this, we made this trip with 4 people in a motorhome and then 3 75-pound dogs.
No, I did not know that. They're awfully quiet.
And the reason they're exceptionally good dogs. And the reason we did that is we took away their house, the kids. And speaking about the kids, we took away their house, their friends, their school, all kinds of stuff that they held near and dear, even if it wasn't in reality important, but it was important to them. I told my wife that we can't take away their dogs, and not only that, but I'm a big person that believes in commitment. We made a commitment when we adopted the dogs from the rescue that we were going to take them and care for them and love them like they're our own. And, I said, just because we decide to change our lives, we can't just abandon these 3 animals. They won't understand. We can leave our kids at a truck stop. They'll get why that happened. We can't leave dogs there because they won't understand. So that's always the ongoing threat. Hey, you don't knock it off, I'm going to leave you at a truck stop. So, we made that transition with them. So it's 8feet12paws.com. And I was really diligent about writing it. It was therapeutic for me. We've discussed this, that the writing was, it had a catharsis to it that I would get through stuff and write and kind of put my feelings down. And there's the whole transition from leaving the police department to living in a motor home and, the experiences that we had. It's a pretty cool piece. I need to actually get more active with it and start writing some more stuff because a lot of stuff has happened since the last article that we've written. So, but yeah, that's the best way. And then I'm on Facebook. After Ferguson, we all changed our names on Facebook because, you didn't want to be found out because they would target your family. So it's Zach Rack my name on Facebook is Zach Rack, ZACKRACK. And, either that or the Mental Health Warriors group, I'm in there and trying to be as active as I can. So any way they can get a hold of me, I'm happy to help or happy to talk if anybody needs anything or has questions or advice or wants to know how to put solar on an RV or, try to get through anxiety.
Awesome, brother. Yeah, we'll make sure that we include all those links in the show notes page. So listen, man, we'll call this episode 1 of 2 with you, and I really appreciate the time. I appreciate you bringing it, and I appreciate you giving us some insight into the world of policing and what it can look like after. I think a lot of people are going to find this very inspiring. So thanks, brother.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for being on, Jason. Giving somebody an opportunity to voice make their inner voice or outer voice is a great gift that you give people.
All right, buddy. Take care.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Zach. I enjoyed the conversation, my friend, and you have a ton of insight to share. And I want to encourage you, right? If you never need to feel trapped. You can always be working towards charting a new path for yourself or creating a new destiny. It doesn't have to happen overnight. You don't have to freak out at the office one day and walk away from it all, but you can always be working on things to expand your knowledge, expand your relationships, and expand the opportunities you have in your life, because those opportunities come from the knowledge you acquire and the relationships that you have, and probably most importantly, the willingness that you show in being vulnerable and authentic, so people know that when they deal with you, they're dealing with someone they can trust. Zach is a absolutely wonderful example of that. And I'll end this episode like I end every single episode, and that's by saying, if you have struggled, I want you to know that I have struggled too. And if you ever want to talk to me, I want you to know that I will not judge you. Until next time, my friends, keep on keeping on. Keep on building the life you were meant to live. Or you know what? If you don't have a fucking clue how to do that, keep trying to compassionately figure out what life you are meant to live, and just keep plugging away at it, and have fun during the process, because that's ultimately what it's all about. I'm having fun doing this podcast. I'm having fun with the Mental Health Warriors. I'm having fun doing masterminds. Not every day is a great day. Some days are tougher than others, but keep on keeping on, guys. And I am here for you. So remember, I'll say it one last time. You get a 2 for this time. If you struggled, I've struggled too. If you ever want to talk to me, I will not judge you. And we'll see you next time.